Ben Smith, good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
So much happening right now, and the Elon-Trump relationship, such as is what I really want to explore with you. When you saw the public nature of all of this, you were surprised. You were absolutely, of course, this was coming. What was the first reaction?
I mean, I'm an editor, and so my first reaction was to try to figure out what was happening behind the scenes. And then, as so often with this administration, you realize it's all just playing out in public.
There was no behind the scenes.
Exactly.
At all.
Nope.
Right?
Everything we saw was what they were seeing. They were just two men sitting, posting to their parallel social networks, attacking each other.
So when one of the most spectacular political news stories happens and literally there is nothing for you behind the scenes, there's no story behind the story.
Yeah.
How does that affect the way you do your job?
Right, I mean, it's like covering a stage set. Like you go through the door and you're just on the other side of some plywood wall and there's nothing there. And so, so I think that the media, we can do two things. We can try to help understand it as we're doing here. And then I think the difference between the Trump show and programming on NBC and CBS in primetime is that it has consequences, and you can find and report on the consequences in the world of the decisions he's making. But it is almost uniquely an administration in which what's happening in front of the scenes is so much more interesting than what's happening behind the scenes.
Why didn't Elon realize that this was a really bad idea? Going after the president of the United States, who he's just given $250 million to and spent all of this time saying how much he loves him. Why do you think he couldn't handle that?
I mean, Elon seems to have a lot of different forces driving him, but certainly including what plays well on X. And he, I think, felt some obligation or sentiment that he had to stand up for himself on the internet. He had to post. He couldn't just be chill.
And yet, he's probably going to need to be chill, and has already shown a little bit of backing away. I mean, is there an Elon Always Chickens Out app that's coming out?
Well, I think, you saw Trump really kind of humiliate him on the way out the door. I think this was a little underplayed, because Trump cares a lot about images. And if you look at the image of when Elon, ends his sort of official term, Trump doesn't get up. There's a picture of Trump at the desk shaking his hand, like the way, some annoying person is in your office and you're not going to bother getting up. Shake his hand. And then he presented him, and he saw this with the key to the White House, which is like, if my kids went to the White House, Trump maybe would give them the key to the White House. If like the mayor of some small town they'd get the key to the White House, it's sort of like the lowest level trinket that you give a visitor. And so it was I think it was a sort of deliberately humiliating departure. Musk was in there with a black eye, bouncing off the walls.
Right, so in other words, you're saying Trump was basically really asking for it, was really kind of showing that he was done with Elon, and Elon's reaction was essentially reflecting that reality.
Yeah, and I think Elon felt like, all right, I guess I don't have to lie about my views anymore, particularly about the Trump administration's single biggest priority, this huge tax cut and bill, and just immediately turned to Twitter to say, well, actually, now I can speak freely. This bill is terrible, which is the single most annoying thing he could have done to the White House.
You think that's more annoying for Trump? You said the White House, but you think that's more annoying for Trump than saying I'm going to start a third party? It's more annoying to Trump than saying you should be impeached? More annoying to Trump than saying actually you're all over the Epstein files?
That's also quite annoying.
Yeah.
I would say that's more. Those are really insane, ugly personal attacks. But he started just by attacking the administration's top priority that they were actually trying to get done and imperiling it.
He went after terrorists as well, and that was before the fallout, right? I mean, he made it clear, like, I really don't like what this guy is doing here.
Yeah, I mean, he sort of embodies this bet that his circle made on this administration, which is we'll swallow our objections to elements of what Trump is doing because ultimately we're aligned on something. And then I think you saw the pieces of that something fall away very quickly, like, oh, actually, Trump is hostile to the whole immigrant ethos of Silicon Valley, which includes Musk, by the way. Oh, he's actually hostile to globalization and trade, which are the DNA of Silicon Valley in this world. But at least he's on board with our pet project, which is space. And oh no, actually, and so I think at some point, I think this is true for Musk and also for a lot of his allies, all that's left is that Trump also hates the people they hate on the internet.
I mean, you did see Elon was in the room with the South African president, and of course the Afrikaner, sort of case that Trump was willing to get on board with. It clearly wouldn't have moved anywhere otherwise. You saw that Elon was able to insert himself along with OpenAI in deals that were important to the Trump administration. So it wasn't like he was getting nothing for his money, right?
No, but it had gone from being a huge alignment of big principles to, on one hand, very minor fringy issues. I don't have complex views on the place of sort of Afrikaners in South Africa, but it's not a top tier US issue. And then totally transactional things like getting in on the Gulf AI stuff.
But totally transactional things are really important, and people pay a lot of money for totally transactional
No,
things.
and Musk has managed to also imperil that now.
Yeah, and I mean, his role at Doge was not insignificant. I mean, they shut down USAID. They've gotten rid of 10% plus of employees in the U.S. government. I mean, that's a lot more than most people have ever said they've accomplished in administration. Do you think it's fair for Elon to feel like really he got nothing out of this?
I think Trump, with Doge in particular, which was not something that Donald Trump spent his time campaigning for, which he kind of on a lark and charmed by Musk's enthusiasm for the project and for the idea that we're bringing in this, brilliant business leader to restructure government, bought into, and then watched Musk both, do very, very unpopular things, imperil Trump's own popularity. And then, later it's been reported that Trump was asking his aides, hey, wait, was this whole Doge thing BS? Because they didn't come anywhere near the kind of spending cuts that Trump wanted. What Musk was able to accomplish was programmatic attacks on liberal priorities, particularly USAID, that it doesn't take a engineering genius. It just takes a kind of blunt force political will to...
Well, one could argue that no one did more anti-DEI over the last several months, which Trump did want to campaign on, than Elon.
Right, and these were aggressive programmatic spending cuts. They weren't government reform. They were just stopping doing things that Trump didn't want to do. But I think they did not ultimately find any waste, fraud, or abuse, and they didn't. It doesn't look like government spending is on track to go down. So they did, some very, very polarizing, highly partisan programmatic cuts that Trump likes, and didn't really find government efficiencies in a meaningful way.
So broadly speaking, what does this tell you about kleptocracy in the U.S.? What does this tell you about oligarchy in the U.S.? I mean, here's a guy that came out, and I mean, in some ways, the thing that I thought he did that would be most offensive to Trump was say, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be president.
Yeah.
Because that's about as core to Trump as one can get. So I bought this presidency for you, and now you're showing ingratitude. Does that tell you more about the American political system or less?
I mean, I think Musk is wrong, and Trump knows it. And that I think, the thing that, and this is your field, not mine, but you see all over the world, is ultimately in these situations, the power is with the political figure, not the oligarchs, and that these and the powerful political leaders can bring oligarchs to heel and can force them to do what they want. And I think that's as Musk is sort of in retreat, as his allies, by the way, are kind of cowering. One of the sort of amusing subplots of the week is that the All In podcast, which is their main mouthpiece, didn't release an episode because I think they're so stressed out about
they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're David Sachs, what advice would you give AI advisor, All In guy, very, very close to Musk, not Trump personally? What advice do you give him right now?
I mean, I think the challenge with people around Donald Trump, that you've seen over and over in the first administration and in this administration, I'm not gonna, I wouldn't want to give David Sachs advice, but but ultimately, Donald Trump is running the government. It's about Donald Trump. If you are in some way misaligned with Donald Trump or getting more attention to Donald Trump, or he just gets sick of you, or your friend is tweeting mean things about him, you're ultimately everyone other than Trump loses in these exchanges. And I think, and David Sachs is obviously in the firing line right now. I think knives are certainly out for him in the kind of MAGA wing of the Republican Party. And it'll be this tug of war between essentially the Steve Bannon-led MAGA world, which sees these guys as transhumanist oligarchs who stand against the common American, and the crypto universe, which loves David Sachs, is not exactly the same as Elon, but does have a lot of sway, and Donald Trump's over it, partly because Trump is in the crypto business in a big way.
Donald Trump is 78 years old. He's going to be president, assuming his health holds up, for another 3 years plus, and then he's not. A lot of these crypto bros have had a longer history and are likely to have a much longer future with a much wealthier Elon than they do with Trump. Why do you think no one seems to view it that way?
I mean, I think Trump's power to reward his friends and punish his enemies in the very short term, in very consequential and permanent ways, is totally unprecedented. And he loves doing it. And so I think that they don't think they can wait him out.
So, in other words, these are very short-term people in a very short-term environment.
Well, I think the amount of damage that Donald Trump can do to your trajectory can have real long-term impact.
And so you're saying something that sounds very, very different from the taco trade, the Trump always chickens out, right? Elon doesn't seem to imply that.
The markets almost uniquely, right, can't be bullied, can't be talked into or out of their direction. And so Trump has repeatedly chickened out in the face of the markets. Individual business leaders, individuals of all sorts in civil society and the media can be intimidated, and Trump knows it, and he usually wins that game of chicken.
Now, you brought up Steve Bannon. He has been saying for a long time that Elon is not long for this administration. Yeah. He hates this guy publicly and privately. But he also thought that Trump wouldn't kick him to the curb. He also thought that ultimately Elon's money and his reach was too important for Trump and the Republicans, and that as a consequence, they would still maintain a pretty warm relationship. He was wrong about that. Why do you think?
I thought that too. I mean, I thought that Trump had built a stable, if challenging, alliance between a kind of nationalist right and these tech oligarchs. I mean, I think Elon was doing a bunch of things that Trump didn't like, from getting a lot of attention to reportedly doing a lot of drugs, a thing that Trump doesn't like. And there was just some accumulation of provocations. And then Elon then comes out and criticizes the bill, and Trump says that he's disappointed in Elon. He doesn't, there's a very, very mild thing for Donald Trump to say. And that is when Elon escalates, goes bananas. I think Elon could have slunk quietly back to his business, a little bit banged up and humiliated, but not at war with the President of the United States. And he acted impulsively, escalated massively. And now, I think I think it is probably not the likeliest outcome that Trump cancels all his contracts and starts investigating his citizenship. It's not out of the question.
It would be really challenging, right? I mean, the U.S. DoD, Department of Defense, really actually needs a lot of the contracts that they have with SpaceX. They don't have alternate incumbents to that. This isn't just like the Starlink deal. Do you think that Trump ultimately, I mean, Trump's been quite good at maintaining good relations with really wealthy people that he needs.
Yep.
Internationally, like in the Gulf states, but also domestically. And even if they annoy him, right? Is Elon an exception, do you think, to that, or no?
Well, I think, is Elon a totally rational actor? I don't really know. I mean, I think that you're right. Elon is too big to fail for the United States right now. I think if you see a Democratic administration come in, they're going to have to find a way to make a separate peace with Elon Musk, and they will want to investigate, punish tech oligarchs. They're going to have to find a way to hold Musk harmless and go after somebody else for the reasons you mentioned. He's just so integral to the U.S. technology infrastructure, to the defense infrastructure for now, that I think they'll just have to live with him. I mean, Bannon is calling on Trump to nationalize.
And deport.
Yes, nationalize and deport seems to be the program. But short of that, which I think is not going to happen, yes, Trump will have to find a way to deal with Musk.
But I'm not even sure that Bannon actually would want that, frankly. Do you think he actually would?
I don't know what's in his heart, Ian.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, because you know that like it's a very spectacular thing to say, and that's why you say it, and it plays well, and you're even quoting it, right? So it is, of the people out there with a following, he says the things that are most immediately quotable. That doesn't necessarily make them things that he believes.
Yeah, and I think it just raises these bigger questions of, wait, what is the Trump administration about? And I think one of the versions was it's about unleashing the American economy, about getting the government out of the way in a very almost traditional Republican way with a Silicon Valley spin. We're going to sort of like race into this bright AI future. And there was another part that was it's about getting Americans back working in factories, cutting off the rest of the world. And I do think the real underpinning of this deal that Trump made with Silicon Valley, it has now come down to, we hate the woke people, you hate the woke people, we have that in common. We may have totally different views of the rest of the economy, but that is sort of the remaining shared priority, is the culture war.
Now, Ben, you said that part of an understanding of whether or not they can still do business together is whether Elon is a completely rational actor. You didn't say that about Trump.
No, I think Trump actually, Trump is pretty predictable, right? I mean, he's entertaining, he's surprising, but the things that he is doing are things he has been promising to do for decades. And the pattern of somebody getting into the spotlight with him, taking a little too much of it, and getting cast into the outer darkness is also pretty predictable, which is why everyone predicted that Elon couldn't last forever. Although I think we mostly predicted that there was a sort of a détente, that they could get along without having some meltdown, which they have now had.
You think that ultimately, whether or not there is going to be an entente between the two, that they can work together in ways that would clearly be still, even today, in the strong personal interests of both men, is really up to Elon?
I think that's right. I mean, and as you say, their interests are aligned. Trump has a lot going on, actually. Trump, in some ways, Elon has a lot going on. Trump has more going on. And so, if Elon can fit into the world he's trying to build, he can go pick other fights, and Elon is a useful ally. But I don't think it's all that predictable what Musk does. I don't think Musk's actions have been all that predictable over the last few years. He's made some huge gambles, in some of which, like the acquisition of Twitter and the sort of full-throated support of the Republicans, seem to be paying off.
Until they don't.
Yeah, until they don't.
And then we'll find out. Well, maybe he doesn't know himself where he's going to be.
And that's certainly, that's the impression I have. I don't think that he or people around him really know what he's going to do until he does it, until he tweets it.
Ben Smith, great to have you on GZERO.
Thanks for having me.